What is the scariest thing you have witnessed with your own eyes? Arrived at an accident about 30 seconds after it occurred. A friend of mine was driving and rolled the car. She was thrown clear, no seatbelt, wear them FFS, and hit a tree. I found her, did first aid and helped the paramedics lift her onto the stretcher and into the ambulance. Her body stopped functioning about a week later, but it's pretty obvious she died there. Massive brain trauma. It just took a while for the end. I literally got laughed at by my friends when I told them that I wear a seatbelt when I use Uber. My GF didn't use seatbelts before I met her. I told her I wouldn't date her unless she started using a seatbelt. Petty, I know, but the last thing I want in life is a phone call that she died or something. Saw an old man slip and die at a bus stop in Portland early in the morning when I was a teenager. That was sad, but what really shook me was the way he was picked up by an ambulance. The sidewalk was washed off, and they left. Within 15 minutes people were occupying that space waiting for a bus, and it was like it had never happened. Saw the aftermath of a teenager who fell at a skate rink and hit her head on a concrete step that surrounded the skating surface. Dead right there. Ambulance came, carted her off, then everyone started skating again. Was so strange. I saw a semi-truck start barreling down the grass median on an interstate highway in Florida, which at first struck me as funny until they started driving into oncoming traffic. We were in a Jeep, so we drove way off the side of the highway in the grass just as the truck hit a Toyota in front of us, and then slammed into one of the pilings on an overpass. The truck driver died instantly. I tried to work the other guy free but was pinned in tight and he died within a couple of minutes. They probably slept through the whole thing. The Toyota had 4 college students driving home for Thanksgiving. I went to check on them after the trucker died. It looked like the driver swerved away, so the truck hit his side, immediately killing him and the passenger behind him. The other 2 didn't appear to be hurt, but were in shock. My friend and I kept the other 2 talking until the EMTs arrived. You and your friend are good people. A job I used to work at, my boss had a heart attack in his office and died in the middle of the shift. The office lights were motion activated, so we thought he left to go something as it was dark. I went into the office to get a new radio and there he was, leaned back in his chair with his eyes wide open. Scariest thing I've ever seen. I found a co-worker dead of a heart attack in the bathroom with motion activated lights. Can confirm it's a terrifying and traumatic experience. Sorry you had to go through it. Working the graveyard shift at a convenience store. In the back office, stoned playing medieval Total War 2. Door chime rings and I look over at the CCTV monitor. Guy with a ski mask and gun had just walked in. I jumped up and slammed locked the office door. The guy takes 2 steps toward the office, pauses, then jogs out the front door. Usually these things end up okay, but I've always had the feeling that if I had been out front I wouldn't have survived. In late May 2013, I was going to visit my aunt and uncle, who lived in Moore, Oklahoma, and I got there around the 18th. 2 days later, a tornado warning was sent out, and we saw the clouds get darker as time went on, and then I saw a blockage of cloud touch the ground. I watched as that thing grew and came towards town, with the sirens blaring all around. It was simultaneously the most horrifying yet beautiful thing I had and still have ever seen in my entire life. I stood there for about a minute before I got pulled away and brought down to the storm cellar. When we came back up, all that was left was foundation. I can understand the awe. That is one of the ways people die. They can get almost hypnotized by a tornado. My mom and stepdad had one hit their house in Ohio in the 70s and they got caught up watching it come and almost didn't get to the basement in time. When I was 14, I cleaned rooms at this cheap motel that was used mostly for prostitution and partying doing drugs. I saw many disturbing things such as a crack pipe left in the room with baby diapers nearby, but the thing that haunts me the most was going into a room to clean and the person who stayed there had committed suicide by slicing open their own neck and bleeding out. I quit that day. That is a fricked up job for a 14-year-old. My stepdad committed suicide right next to his plow truck while my mom watched. I wasn't there at the time, but immediately after it happened my mom called me in an absolute state. By the time I arrived the police had already taken the body, but the windshield and front corner panel were completely covered in his brain and blood. My mom rode to the hospital having a panic attack and I stayed to clean up. I drove his pickup into town, brought it to the car wash I had been to dozens of times over the years, and hosed her down. After delivering my now dead stepdad's truck back to my mom's house and pushing the blood trail in the snow up into a mound, I rode to the hospital in my car to see how my mom was. She was pretty loopy. They gave her something and I remember feeling comforted by that, hoping she would maybe forget part of the trauma she had witnessed. I stayed a while but eventually decided to head out, figuring I'd stop at my mom's one last time, on the way, to make sure I didn't miss anything. Really didn't want her to have to come home to any more than she had to. My inspection of the immediate area looked good, with the exception of some weird looking thing on the same side of the house. The side of the house he had shot himself in front of had a fenced-in area for mom's pups, and the mystery object was directly above a large, homemade doghouse. I walked through the house, entered the side yard, climbed up onto the doghouse and pulled the mystery white blob off the siding. Had the iris been facing away from the wall I would have known immediately it was his eyeball, but I didn't. I grabbed it and spun it in my hand before his blue iris looked into mine. My heart sank. I don't know quite how to explain the feeling but it made me physically ill. My guess is that the concussion blast from the bullet blew one of his eyes out at high speed. I pitched his frozen eyeball off into the field, got back in my car and drove home to get drunk. Frick, this story really hit me. If I may share, my stepdad of 18 years shot himself in the head in April of 2021 in front of my mom. Crazy the parallels in our stories. I hope you're doing well, you medicinal taco meat. When I was 15, my mom suddenly ended up in the hospital. Long story short, she needed immediate heart valve surgery or she was going to die. I will never forget saying goodbye to her and holding her for what felt like seconds and decades, and then watching my little brother hug her goodbye too. He didn't understand. We had just told him he was adopted 2 weeks prior and all he knew was the only person who had ever been a mom to him was about to die. My family all hugged her and waited in the waiting room. 8 hours later the doctor came out and said she flatlined 3 times, but she lived. She was told then she had 6 months to live and was diagnosed with a rare genetic disease that I was then diagnosed with following. That was 9 years ago. No matter what happens in the future, I will thank God, the heavens, or whoever is responsible for giving me the extra time with my mom. She's still going today and very well, but that was rough. Dang, her mom's a fighter. I am glad she got another chance, man. 15 years old, driving home from work with my mom late at night. Saw emergency lights ahead and we're eager to see what was going on. It ended up being 3 of my friends killed on impact in a single vehicle car accident. My mom had just went through that intersection 10 minutes earlier on her way to get me. We stayed there for several hours and watched their cell phones light up in the wreckage before they pulled the car apart to get the bodies out. Whoa, the details that stand out in these situations always surprises me. For this situation, the phones lighting up. Just this past Saturday I hit the local bar to get some carry out and a growler. I saw a friend outside and chatted for maybe 3 minutes when another guy took a step, tripped, and face planted hard into a stepped area of concrete. In the blink of an eye this guy was within minutes of dying. He began convulsing and vomiting uncontrollably, could not speak, and was bleeding profusely from his head, nose, and ears. He hit so hard that his nose was shattered and his skull split open across his forehead. EMTs were stunned and got him out of there as fast as possible. The bartender came out and washed more blood and vomit than I've ever seen from the pavement with buckets of hot bleach water. The scariest part was the speed at which this happened. People were standing so close to this guy but he went down so fast and hard that there wasn't time to react and catch him. The violence of the impact was shocking. Things like this really freak me out. Humans survive gunshot wounds, explosions, amputations, and all kinds of other atrocities. Yet it's still so simple to suffer an injury of that degree with one wrong step. I saw a person fall out of the back of a pickup going 65 miles per hour. He hit the ground and rolled, then stood up. His baseball cap did not fall off. The truck he was in did not stop. I almost ran over him as he fell into my lane. It was clear he was in a little shock, so I walked him over to the side of the road and called 911. He had a mild case of road rash. It was summer, so short sleeves, I can't imagine what happened when the people got to their house and someone said, "Where's Bill?" When I was 9 or 10 I was in Florida and we went to this arcade pizza joint. Went to the bathroom and saw on a stall wall a boy's name and that it said he was here. Fast forward some time and I'm back in Indiana sitting in front of the TV as a kid and watching Unsolved Mysteries. They begin to talk about an abducted boy who the only clue they had was that bathroom stall and his name written in it. His name gave me chills and then nightmares for weeks where I saw his name carved out in the stall. I'm watching old school Unsolved Mysteries right now. Healthcare provider here. Was in my second year of school and was on clinical rounds for the summer. Next to last day had visited a cancer patient who wanted to leave AMA, against medical advice, to go home, see his cat again, and die in peace. No problem, homie, I literally want you to go see your cat. Continued rounds until we heard a code called. Rush back to find the guy's tumor in his lungs had ruptured and he was literally spewing blood on his bed and the floor as I walked into the room. Went unresponsive and watched them do like 10 minutes of CPR before calling it. Definitely had never watched someone die before that. He never got to see his cat again. I haven't had the most adventurous life, but I remember one time when we were camping. My family was hiking around on this big rock and it started getting cloudy. My dad and siblings climbed up to the top of the rock but my mom and I decided it was too steep for us. My dad reached up into the air and said he could feel static on his fingers. My little sister's hair starting standing up a little, and my dad was just standing there with my brother, laughing at the staticky feeling he got when he reached up. My mom and I tried to convince him to come down but he wouldn't. Eventually he ended up getting down and no one was hurt. But I was terrified watching my little sister's hair stand up and my dad not do anything about it. He's a good dad, but sometimes he can be a moron. He didn't think the situation was that serious, even with my mom and I freaking out. I feel like Reddit is doing a good job of spreading awareness about this and imminent lightning strikes. I had no idea about this phenomena until I saw it on here. Now I know to get the heck away. When I was a kid, probably around 10, I lived in a very seedy apartment complex in San Bernardino. One evening I witnessed this dude get shot up by the mailboxes. That was scary. On another occasion, some kids who stole my bike threw a giant boulder through our window as we were watching TV. That was probably the scariest thing that happened to me directly. They did it as revenge, following me directing the cops to the bike and having them retrieve it. Gun-toting mailboxes. Was bartending one night and had a guy shoot his friend in the dong in the bathroom. They came out. Dude still had a gun in his hand and I was trapped behind the bar. Thought my butt was getting shot as well for a few seconds. I'm guessing his friend put his dong where it didn't belong. My cousin getting attacked by a Rottweiler. We had a neighbor, 14, that had a Rottweiler tied up in their backyard. We always thought it was friendly. We would hang out with our neighbor often. This one particular time my neighbor's sister was feeding playing with the dog. My cousin, 8, and his twin brother went over to join her. One of them got on the doghouse and the dog didn't seem to like that, so it latched onto my cousin's thigh. He jumped down and tried to run away but the dog pushed him down and grabbed onto my cousin's head and started thrashing him around. I was in shock. I couldn't move and it took me a few seconds to realize what was going on. It was like watching it happen in slow motion. His head being snatched back and forth and blood everywhere. I snapped out of it when I saw my neighbor run towards them and started punching the dog in the face. He let go and my cousin took off running and screaming that he had a hole on his head. I ran over to him and tried to calm him down. His scalp was hanging off his head. I could see the white of his skull. We lived next to my parents' restaurant and the parking lot was full of customers. I called 911 and the ambulance was there in minutes. He was taken to the hospital and had to have his scalp stapled and stitches on his chest and thigh. He was scared of dogs for the longest after that. Me, a 25-year-old tram driver, once almost hit a group of teenagers who ignored all warning signs, causing me to hit the emergency brakes and injure 4 of the passengers in my tram, who fell to the floor due to the sudden stop of the tram. Also, I was traumatized for 2 weeks and needed to take off work to go to therapy. I swear, in that moment I saw these kids, I just hit the brakes, closed my eyes and prayed I don't feel an impact. That was by far the scariest thing in my life so far. That would have been terrifying. I feel for all train tram drivers who have accidents and suicides while they're driving. Unthinkably traumatic. My dad worked for the railways, in an office job, but he heard this happened a lot more than people realize. Mine is a bit silly, and honestly might not be the scariest thing in my life, but I felt like some of the heavier comments could use a funnier scary moment to offset them. While hiking in Japan, I came across a troop of snow monkeys, and one bore its fangs and started chasing me, probably because I wasn't thinking and made eye contact, which they see as a sign of aggression. He chased me for several minutes, and I am pretty sure I felt it swiping at my pant legs. I just had this vision in my head of it climbing me like a tree and biting my face or neck. I told my parents this story when I was showing off pictures from my trip, and the first picture I stopped on didn't have a lot in it for reference. My mom sat and listened to this story in horror, until I went to the next slide, where you can clearly see that snow monkeys stand no more than 2 feet tall. I think she was picturing something chimpanzee size. I heard a story once about an animal shelter volunteer who got her finger bitten off by a tiny little chihuahua. Never underestimate a wild animal just because it's small. I was chased by an army of angry monkeys. Happened in Agra, India. The old city terraces are connected and the monkeys live there. It has just rained and my neighbor went to terrace with a long stick to see if there are any water blockages. I and my brother accompanied him. Suddenly we could see an army of around 50 monkeys running towards us. The neighbor announced Barsati Bandar, Bago, rainy monkeys. Run equals the monkeys have become mad because they are wet. Run. We all ran down the stairs and got into the first door that was open and closed the door. The monkeys came behind us and stayed there making all noises for 15 minutes. Maybe. That was the fastest I ever ran in my life. Isn't that Temple Run? I was with my mom at McDonald's. I was about 8 years old. We had just pulled up in the parking lot. A man came out, dragging his son by the collar. The kid was about 13 or 14 years old. He was also crying. The man grabbed the boy by the throat and slammed his head against the wall. I distinctly remember the boys choked off screaming. The man pinned him against the wall and hit him with a closed fist. My mom immediately called 911 and stepped out of the car to yell at the man, telling him to stop. He called her a B and told her to mind her own business. The cops came quickly. They interviewed me and my mom, then the boy and his father. Then they let the man go home with his boy. The cops said they didn't see anything, so they couldn't prove anything. I remember being frantic, terrified. I begged them to stop the man from driving away. They ignored me, got in their car, and left. It was the most scared I'd ever been up until that moment. Watching the cops drive away and the black pickup with the dad and his son drive away as well. I will never forget that kid or how scared I was seeing him hurt. Then seeing people just let him get hurt more. Don't know specific laws in US, but still pretty sure cops themselves don't have to witness an incident to be able to prove it. They had 2 eyewitnesses and you and your mom. If you enter an unresponsive but breathing from a possible overdose, a nurse can stick a catheter up your urethra and you will watch a grown man do the world's fastest sit-up. A much needed chuckle after reading this thread. I was working at a chemical plant and saw a guy in fork truck make a turn too fast. He wasn't wearing his seatbelt and the top of the cage landed on his head. I froze for a moment. It was so horrifying. I then ran over and killed the ignition. Some other workers came and we lifted the cage up high enough to pull him out, but it was obviously too late. I can still his blood running down a nearby drain. Me and my friends were climbing up and jumping off of a partially collapsed dang. The side with deep water was prob a 15-foot drop and you had to climb up the slick concrete to jump off again. The left half of the dang was whole and you could walk along the top. The right half was collapsed and had about an inch of water over it. The collapsed part was rubble with rebar and all kinds of sharp metal sticking out. I was climbing on the corner, partially over water, partially over the collapsed part, when I slipped about 1 foot from the top. One of my friends on the top grabbed the back of my life jacket at the last second and held me. For a few seconds I was fully suspended over a 60-foot drop with bad crap at the bottom. I managed to get a hold of the dang wall again and climb back up. I owe that guy my life. I learned about the drowning machine and you will never get me within 100 feet of a dam ever again. Cycling home after work in London and seeing some discarded chips and tomato sauce in the gutter. As I rode slowly past, I saw a crow pick up a chip, dip it into the sauce, and then gobble the whole thing down. Repeatedly. I still think about sometimes, and occasionally it haunts my dreams. If I had seen that, I would have lost my crap. I love crows. Hopefully you don't ever come across a crow funeral, because that even made me feel a little bit uneasy when I saw it. I was 10 and my family and I were on vacation in NYC, exploring Wall Street, when the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center in 9/11. The chaos I saw that day still haunts me to this day. I was in 6th grade at the time, so the bell rang and I was going home to eat, and I saw some guy fighting this other guy. They were classmates. He grazed him below the eye, and while he was getting ready to throw another punch, I saw something shiny in his hand. Apparently it was a knife, and the guy that was punched was stabbed 18 times, I believe, in the back and cut below his eye. Didn't lose his vision. After this happened, the teachers rushed him in the hospital. The blood on his clothes was quite visible. I saw someone slip and fall from the top of Half Dome in Yosemite. I'm a first responder and have seen bad things, but I have control for the most part in those situations. Watching someone tumbling to their death and knowing nothing can be done was hard. Certainly didn't help my fear of heights either. My mom called me at midnight asking me to go check on my dad because she was worried about him, but didn't say exactly why. I found him drunk in the woods behind the house, sitting on a stump with a pistol in his mouth. I spent the next 40 minutes sitting there talking him down. He eventually gave me the gun and went to bed. I'll never get over it. Oh dear, big hugs to you. Please try and talk to a professional about this if you haven't already. Two drunk homeless guys were fighting and one got pushed down onto the Miami Metrorail tracks with a train visible in the distance. He wasn't able to stand on his own and nobody was helping. I jumped down and forced him back up as someone else pulled him onto the platform. I made it back up with only like 20 seconds before the train came. I was afraid I would be electrocuted or wouldn't have been able to get him back in time and would have had to leave him. It's awesome that you jumped down there to help him. Watched a guy slip and fall off a walking track right off the side of a cliff. Legit thought I just seen someone fall to their death. He was okay. I always used to imagine what it would be like to fall off a walking track. Finally saw it in real life. That crap had me shook. I saw a head-on collision between two SUVs on a remote road, approximately 100 kilometers from the Closet Hospital. I was first on the scene. Pulled bodies from burning vehicles after breaking windows. My shirt caught on fire, pulling people out. I attempted CPR with 2 other people on 4 of the 6 people, until they passed away in our arms. Many of them were either missing body parts or CPR was not possible due to severe facial injuries. One man kept reaching up to me asking me if he was going to die, and telling me he couldn't breathe, but his lungs were obviously perforated. I breathed for him until he passed away. I told him he was loved and was with people who cared for him. The vehicles caught on fire, causing a forest all around us, and had to be put out with a helicopter hours later. During the hour that it took for EMS to get to the scene, a bear walked through the scene, and we had to constantly scare it away, probably due to the smell of blood. I watched 2 people burn to death because I could not reach them through the fire. I promise I tried to save them. I was covered in blood, body fluids, bone chips, and found a tooth in my pocket after. I found a baby laying face down on the road and placed it on what I thought was the mom while doing CPR. In the end, the baby and mother were the only ones of all 8 who lived. So many people's lives were destroyed that day. I still have PTSD from the experience. I often feel like I failed at saving people, but their bodies were so severely damaged. Smells, sounds, textures were all so vivid that I get flashbacks. I'm emotional writing this. Since then, I have had many horrifying dreams, but the dreams that stand out most are dreams of meeting the people who passed. In the dreams they tell me positive words of encouragement and appreciation, even laughs and jokes about life. It's weird. Please drive safe, love each other. I tried everything I could do to help. I promise to God I tried. Mate, I posted my experience with a car crash elsewhere in the thread. I believe you tried as hard as you could. We're not miracle workers, and sometimes all we can do is what we can do. My friend could have had her crash right outside in her and it would have made no difference to the outcome. You did good. I saw one of my best friends wreck his motorcycle right in front of me while we were out riding. A guy in a Jeep Liberty pulled out to make a left-hand turn right in front of us. I was riding tandem behind my pal, so I had plenty of time and space to see things unfold and avoid a collision. My buddy, who didn't wear any gear, crashed into the side of the car, slamming his head against the hood. This was several years ago. My buddy lived through the ordeal and I had PTSD in a bad way, but it was terrifying watching someone I've known for over 20 years crash like that. I was 12, on the way to an amusement park at 9-something in the morning. A drunk driver slowly drove off the road and into a ditch, flipped his car over on its side. Dude climbed up and out of the window. Still scared me though. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.